All right, everyone, welcome again. Thanks for joining our session today. We're going to get started, but as always, we go ahead and hold our questions for the end of the presentation, let folks get through everything. But if for some reason you want to put a question in the chat box, we'll get that addressed by our behind the scenes SMEs from Colby Jackson and Kim Ernstrom. They'll be answering those questions, but we're going to take full questions after the presentation. With that, we'll get started with Jeff Arnberger. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Arnberger. My day job, I'm the Deputy Division Chief of Fire Operations for the BLM here at NWCG. And one part of that day job is I'm also the BLM representative to the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, the NWCG, to what we call the Executive Board, the actual NWCG. So I'm going to kick it off here and turn it over to the actual experts in this stuff. But we thought it'd be good to kind of give a short history lesson to kind of set up the topic and explain how we got to where we are and what we're trying to do with this the incident position training modernization effort. So getting in a Wayback Machine, going back probably 30 years or something, NWCG and the wildland fire community was really in a training-based system. It was not a performance-based system, and so everybody realized it back then, and so they implemented the performance-based system side of it, which is what we know as the position task books, right? It's on the job training, document that in the task books. So, which was great at the time, but there was a second piece of that effort that was supposed to happen and never did, and that was to go back and look at the training curriculum and adjust that to match, knowing that we're not in a training-based system anymore, we're in a performance-based system. That didn't happen. It never happened. In fact, over the years, training was actually added, more courses, and the whole training curriculum, NWCG, just the sheer volume of it was super daunting and hard to maintain, and was getting ready to topple under its own weight. So fast forward a few years to 2015, and was actually in this room. We were having a meeting. It was a bunch of ops folks and training folks from the different agencies here on campus, and we were just brainstorming, like, why does it take so long to get an NWCG course updated? Why does the course not necessarily match my task book? Why do neither one of those things really match the actual job on the ground that I'm doing? And why is my task book already signed off, and here I am sitting in a class, taking a class when I've already proven that I'm qualified, right? So a lot of good questions. That's when the light bulb went off for us that second piece of implementing a performance-based training never really happened, and we needed it to happen. So we got together, we went, presented it to the NWCG Executive Board, and I was not on it at the time, so I was a recipient of this about a year later. It's like, good job. So anyway, we presented it, NWCG agreed and included this as part of the larger systems improvement process or program, I don't know what you want to call it, effort, I guess. And that larger thing included things like, we're going to update the website, we're going to modernize publications, we're going to kind of change committee structure to be more efficient, things like that. And then there was this piece about updating incident position descriptions and task books and training. So that's where I come in from my perspective as the NWCG Executive Board. The BLM supported it then, and they support it now. It's my hope, and I don't want to steal their thunder here. I'm going to turn it over to Katie and Annie here to talk more about NWCG and the actual effort. But I'm hoping that this effort here in a few years will culminate in actual incident position descriptions that accurately describe what people are doing on the ground, nimble training that is just focused on what you need to know, and really good task books. And hopefully that'll free up a bunch of time, energy, money that we can maybe focus elsewhere, and focus into things like maybe teaching people how to be good trainers and evaluators and good trainees and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's kind of the background from the exec board perspective. And so I guess the only other thing I'll say before I turn it over is, so where do you all come in? This effort, it's going to be over the next 4 or 5 years, really a big push, is going to require subject matter experts, and the subject matter experts for this are going to come from the field. So I guess I would just ask that, watch the airwaves, and if you see calls for SMEs to go, update a training course or a task book or whatever is part of this bigger effort, please consider doing that. Raise your hand for it, and and we'll help get you plugged in, because this whole thing is really going to run on subject matter experts, and they're the ones that know what right looks like. You folks know what right looks like, and we need you to be involved in order to make this work. That's one of the beauties of NWCG. There's a bunch of us sit in cubicles and sit around a table, make decisions, but really the whole NWCG is driven by folks just like you on the ground. So I'll shut up now. I've been talking for a little while. I'll turn it over to Katie Wood, and she can talk a little bit more about NWCG.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katie Wood, and I'm the NWCG Program Manager here, and looking forward to the conversation today. I really appreciate BLM and External Affairs inviting us to have this conversation today. And I'm accompanied with Annie Benoit, who's the Training Program Manager. And so we'll be tag teaming this presentation and talking a little bit more about the incident performance and training modernization effort. But to start this all off, I wanted to kick off with a little bit about the background of NWCG and how we are organized as a governance body, because I think that helps frame up the conversation. And if we can go ahead and start the presentation.
There we go. Do you have that?
We do. Thanks, Annie.
Okay.
Okay, so a little bit of background about NWCG. Oftentimes when folks think about NWCG, they think about training or some of our publications, specifically the IRPG. But one thing I want to emphasize here is NWCG really is, our mission is as displayed on this screen, that the ability to create this interoperability between the wildland fire organization. And when we say organization, we're talking about the entire wildland fire community. So not only our federal, but state, tribal, and local partners. So it's a really large box that we're trying to move forward. And the idea is that when we show up on a fire, all yellow shirts can talk to each other. And so when I think about NWCG, I really think of NWCG as the foundation of a house for the wildland fire community, because our goal is to set standards to create that interoperability when we move forward. So what this looks like, and from a governance structure, a couple of things worth noting is NWCG as a body, we report to an executive board, and the executive board is comprised of various different representatives from the agencies that we've talked about earlier, and those logos are there on the bottom of the screen. So our federal partners, along with state, local, and tribal entities. And what the goal of the executive board is to provide that strategic leadership and direction to NWCG. And one of the things I want to point out that's really critical for folks to understand is that when we create standards at this level, it has to be on a consensus basis. And so sometimes when things take a while, or it seems like it's a bit cumbersome, it's because all parties at the bottom of the screen there have to come to an agreement for us to move forward with a baseline standard. Worth noting is that NWCG does not create policy, we just create the standard. And so it's up to each entity to actually adopt that policy or the standard per se and issue policy related to that. So it's not uncommon in the field for folks to see the NWCG standard memo and then BLM to put something on top of it that issues it in a more formal fashion. So that's kind of how we operate, and that's why you'll sometimes see the duality there between the agency and then NWCG. One of the things, as I mentioned, people think of NWCG in training, but a tremendous amount of our work is completed by committees and their subsequent subcommittees. And there are 17 committees within NWCG and 82 different subcommittees. And these subcommittees represent all various aspects of the wildland fire community. And we create standards, again, for essentially every aspect, from the PPP that you wear, to the data that you collect in the field, to the training, to how we coordinate aircraft, you name it. And so as you see on the screen here, there's a variety of different acronyms, and these are all the various different committees that exist within NWCG. To kind of refine that down a little bit, just to give you an example for context, each of these committees often will develop standards. And when I say standards, I mean an issue is brought forward from the field or from, let's say, a serious accident investigation or whatnot, and it's tasked to a committee to figure out how to come to a consensus amongst all of our member entities to create some sort of standard that we can all agree to move forward. So with this particular one, the Risk Management Committee, their mission is on the screen here. It's to provide national leadership in wildland fire risk management, health, and safety. And under the risk management committee, you'll see the subcommittees, which is the 6 minutes for safety, hazard tree and felling committee, and the mental health subcommittee. And so when things come up that would pertain to this particular committee, we task it to that committee, and then they go forward and create a standard. One thing I'd like to mention is that these committees and subcommittees mimic the membership that you'll see at the executive board. So again, we have that same broad diversity of expertise coming forward, again, so that we can create that consensus and that interoperability across the field. It's a really unique model within the wildland fire community, and I think that's why it's been sustainable for such a long period of time. And we've been really successful in moving things forward. Last thing I'll mention that will tie into Annie before I pass it over to her is these committees are all responsible for certain positions. So for example, risk management committee is responsible for the safety positions. And so as we move forward with this training effort, there's a lot of close coordination with these committees and the standards that we'll move forward with when we're trying to create and revise our position standards and our IPDs, and then any sort of subsequent training that's developed. So with that, happy to take questions at the end of the presentation related to this, but encourage folks to go to our website as well. And we will be releasing a couple of videos in the near future that sort of further describe some of the committee work and how to get involved if there's any interest. So with that, Annie, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, Katie. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Wonderful. All right, so moving ahead for the rest of the presentation, I am going to talk about the systems improvement effort that Jeff had mentioned to start with, and then kind of this next effort that we're spooling up right now, our incident performance and training modernization piece, and then what we have underway right now. So getting started with systems improvement, I first want to start out kind of focusing in on NWCG's part of building the professional wildland firefighter. So this diagram shows the relationship between the skills and knowledge that are necessary for an agency or department job, both federal and non-federal. And then the position qualifications that are managed by NWCG in the 310-1 publication. So just wanted to demonstrate where NWCG's space lies, and that's in the blue language there on the right, and that's what we're going to be focusing in on today. So as Jeff alluded to earlier, in 2015, our executive board tasked our program manager with doing an overall assessment of our program, just to try to figure out how to improve the effectiveness and efficiency, not just of training, but of the entire program. So we got started and have accomplished some really great things in the last several years. One of them being a complete overhaul to our website. So the intent was to provide easier access to our materials, one-stop shopping for, consolidating all of our information, and then really trying to reduce redundancy throughout the organization. So a note on our website, we're going through another overhaul of that again. So most of it's on the back end, but you'll notice that it's gonna be organized differently and look differently here in the next few months. So be on the lookout for that. I'm pretty excited. It's looking really good. Next effort that we embarked on was trying to really streamline our publications. So we worked hard to establish a really comprehensive publications catalog that you can get to through our website. Really trying to streamline our capability to update our publications and keep those updated. And then as Katie mentioned, just ensuring that we are focused on standards, because that's what NWCG does, is develop standards. And then we also worked hard on the organization and processes behind our committee structure. We updated committee names to reflect truly what their mission was, dialed in their mission, their objectives. And then really importantly, we created position and course stewards so that it was very clear for everybody who managed what position and what course, what training. And then we incorporated various steering committees throughout the organization as well for a lot of our upper level courses. So these items are never going to be 100% complete. That's the term systems improvement. it'll be an ongoing effort as we keep these maintained and updated, in the future. Now our focus more, and what we haven't addressed as thoroughly yet, is incident position management, and then updating our training materials, including our position task books. So that is the focus of our next effort. So systems improvement really is the overarching overhaul effort to our entire organization. And now we are working on incident performance and training modernization. That is our focus right now. Again, on kind of those last bullets, incident position management, our next generation of PTBs, and then really trying to streamline our training. And I'll get into that here in just a second. So some goals of incident performance and training modernization, IPTM, because again, we love acronyms. So we're calling it IPTM. First, we're really trying to develop an integrated performance-based system that's easier for us to update and maintain. So as Jeff mentioned earlier, that was our intent 30 years ago, was a true performance-based system, and we sort of never quite got there. Importantly, too, to that is that, as he mentioned, a lot of our, task books, training, any supporting material was kind of siloed by position, and nothing really talked to each other. It was really hard for NWCG, as we increased the number of positions over the last several years and the training to go with it, to update it and maintain it. It just wasn't a very coherent system. So really working on not only making that a true performance-based system, but allowing us to keep it maintained. And second bullet, trying to base our position training and qualifications off actual position standards. And that's for a lot of reasons. One of them is to better enable consistency amongst our evaluators and our trainees. So as you're moving through the system, you've got that baseline standard to adhere to. And that is, best management practices, a reference on how to do to the position, how to perform the position in the field. Next, whoops, sorry about that. Trigger happy on the mouse there. There we go. Next is really trying to ensure that our position-specific training is absolutely necessary and relevant. Again, this gets back to trying to develop a true performance-based system and shift as much as we can to on-the-job training. So whatever training we develop is going to be absolutely necessary. Take the training before you hit the field and initiate that task book. It's going to set the baseline for performance in the position. And then throughout the system, as we go through this process, really trying to reduce redundancies throughout the system. Again, as the system developed organically over the last several years, things became kind of redundant. You might see the same piece of training in crew boss, as task force leader, as division soup. So we're really trying to reduce that and to reduce the actual amount of training that we're developing as appropriate. And then, as I mentioned, trying to move as much training as we can to actual on-the-job training. And that's through both the position standards. So in some cases, you might be able to just read through duty your responsibility. How do you perform in that duty or responsibility through the standards? And that will suffice. You'll have to be evaluated via the PTB, but that's the on-the-job training piece. And then throughout the effort, really trying to modernize our training materials and our operational tools as we can, moving through it. So most of you are probably familiar with our traditional model of training and qualification. So you start out taking your training course, if there's one for the position, and then you go ahead and initiate your PTB, which again is not always a complete list of duties and responsibilities of the position or what's required of you in the position. And most importantly, that's really an evaluation tool. It was never meant to be a guide for how you operate in the position. And then you go perform your training assignment and you're evaluated, and eventually you get signed off and you're qualified. And there's really no loop for us to get new information out to qualified individuals. Furthermore, we don't necessarily have a system for getting feedback from the field on how we need to improve in the position, whether it be training standards, et cetera, when things change. So that's another kind of hole we've identified in our traditional, current model of training and qualification. So next, I'll share with you our new model of training and qualification that we are currently in the works of working through right now with the crew boss position and the new model moving forward. So you would start off as a trainee here in the green wedge, review incident position package, and the components of that position package are listed on the right-hand side of the screen. And that starts with the incident position description. So I'm guessing a lot of you over the last couple of years have heard us talk about IPDs, and that's just a list of the essential duties and responsibilities for each of our NWCG positions, all the positions listed in the 310-1. Next, you'll have the incident position standards. So a set of standards for each position, and that is the how of the position. If the IPD is the what are the duties and responsibilities, these standards are how you operate in the position. Next is the next generation position task book, and then any essential training or support products to further support the position. So that package will be developed for each of our positions. So the trainee would start off with that, complete any training or support products relevant to the position, and then go out on an assignment and complete the training assignment using the position package to support performance in the field. So moving on to the aqua wedge right there, these two wedges at the bottom kind of go hand in hand in that you're completing your training assignment, you're being evaluated via your PTB, and you're really functioning in that on-the-job training space. And that's more than just being evaluated via your PTB. That's adhering to those standards, that's reviewing the standards, that's having conversations with your evaluator and kind of using them as a coach function as you're out in the field and really trying to, to gain as much as you can, information as you can via that on-the-job training piece. Next, you're evaluated via the PTB and moving into a qualified position. And that's the new model for training and qualification. Really important though to point out the piece in the middle, the new information piece. So that is our mechanism for getting feedback from the field to inject into this system. And then also like a continuing education piece, some mechanism for us to get new information out to qualified individuals. So we can update IPDs and position specific standards, et cetera. And that will be part of this maintenance piece with this cycle. But the continuing education piece is something we're talking about pretty heavily lately as a way to get information again out to qualifieds. And one example I'll use is a couple of years ago, we had a food unit leader, the logistics subcommittee come to us and say, hey, we need a way so that our qualified food unit leaders know their position is really dependent on that contract that is updated every 5 years. We don't have any way to get that new contract in the hands of qualified food unit leaders until they hit the incident, right? So a continuing education component would really support that communication piece for qualified individuals. So an example that I'll share, I mentioned that we're working through the crew boss position right now. We've got it drafted up, the whole package drafted up, and we'll test that course after the new year at the apprenticeship program. But the traditional format for that course is either classroom, 24 hours in the classroom, or like a hybrid scenario where you take half online and then half in the classroom. But it comes out to about 24 hours. And so what we've developed now is more of a scenario-based blended approach with more emphasis on the job or on incident performance-based learning. So this new crew boss package that we have right now ended up with about 7.25 hours of web-based training. So that's asynchronous, online training that the trainee would take on their own before they come together for 6 hours of instructor-led in-person scenario-based instruction. And then the rest of the training for crew boss is based on the position-specific standards and on-the-job training performance in the field. So that ends up being about a 10-hour reduction in crew boss training. So that's one efficiency gain so far in our journey to move as much as we can to on-the-job training. So moving on to the positions that we currently have underway, we are in the middle of working on the Faller 1, 2, and 3 positions. We've worked through the prescribed fire burn boss training. We'll be testing that the first week of December. And I think that course material should be available pretty soon after the first of the year. I mentioned we've got crew boss pretty well buttoned up. We were going to test the course at the end of January. We'll incorporate edits and then test kind of that package. We just got started on medical unit leader. And we're getting ready to start fixed wing parking tender with it through an in-house effort. So we've got half of that done, and we'll start development on that position here shortly. So we recently have been granted approval and received an influx of funding for our program through bill funding to support a large contracting effort, which we're working on that right now and hoping to get that underway late spring of 2024. So we've identified 10 positions for that large contracting effort. Again, we've already are working through or have worked through a number of positions. I just shared that. And we're learning a lot about process and how we're going to approach these next positions through our current process right now. So the way we selected these first 10 positions is we're trying to work from the bottom up throughout all the functional areas. And I've mentioned trying to reduce redundancies as much as we can. And so it's imperative that we work from the bottom up to achieve that goal. And then looking for a mix of complexity as far as positions go, so that we, again, gaining more lessons learned as we work through all of the positions, but understanding that a really complex position that might end up with a true 40 hours of training, for example, medical unit leader, is going to take a lot more effort than something a little more straightforward that will require less training or potentially no training at all. You might end up with just the position standards and the task book and be fine to go perform in the position. Next, we've identified really high priority or high profile positions that need some work that we should address pretty soon. And then if we have really strong committee engagement, or we've got a group of SMEs that are ready to go, that also has played into our decision-making with the selection of our first positions. So the next slide I'm going to share is a draft of the first 10 positions we think we're going to address. I suspect that this is going to change a little bit before we get underway late next spring, but I wanted to share with you the direction that we're headed, again, based on the criteria that I just mentioned there at the bottom of the screen. And then ideally, we know, again, with the lessons learned from the positions that we're working through right now, and then, given the, the first couple of years of this effort, we know that we're going to gain efficiencies and momentum over time, and we'll be able to take on a lot more positions as we move through the next several years. So as far as our efforts right now and what we kind of need to keep moving forward. Right now, we're working on a really robust communication plan. And as that evolves and we start, increasing our communication to the field, it's going to be really imperative that all levels of our leadership really help us with emphasizing the importance of this effort from top down and bottom up. Participation from the field in the form of SME involvement and then reviewing the material and providing feedback to us is paramount in this effort. It's the key to our success. So just that committee support and leadership support in the SME commitment and engagement is really key. So again, we're hoping to get underway with this whole large scale effort late spring 2024. So be on the lookout for our SME recruitment communications and effort to come out later this winter. And so with that, I'll turn it back over and open it up for any questions that folks may have.
Great, thanks, Annie. And looks like we have a couple questions, so I'll switch over to the chat box, but appreciate that. We're just reading it, Mary Jane, addressing your question. Annie, can you see that question?
Yeah, I'm just reading the last part right now.
Okay.
Courses.
So for the first part, as far as reducing classroom time in favor of on-the-job training, I would say also web-based training, asynchronous web-based training where appropriate. That's definitely the direction we're headed. And that is one of the reasons, understanding that we need to make our training more accessible to everybody. And then as far as the classroom courses being a prerequisite for an assignment, that's actually not the decision space of my training group. That would go to the Incident Position Standards Committee, the Training Delivery Committee. So certainly we feel like going through our whole analysis phase for each of our positions and having SME committee, instructional design support, whatever package we put forward, we think that it should be taken, that training should be taken before a task book is initiated. But that's not the system that we live in right now, and I can't foresee the future of what that's going to look like. As far as flexibilities for demonstrating competencies in other formats, we have talked about, and Katie, I'll probably turn this back to you, but recognition of prior learning is new to the organization. And so that will account for some of those other competencies, you know, that people have gained in other areas, other positions, et cetera.
Yeah, so thanks, Annie. We have made a large effort for at least the positions that we share with FEMA, or I guess FEMA owns, that we share with them, looking at the endorsement process. And so I believe Colby put in the chat the ability where you can go and look at the endorsements there. But for certain positions, trying to open up the playing field a little bit to allow folks in the all hazard world to come over and work within the wildland fire community on our incidents.
Thanks, Mary Jean, for that. Appreciate that. Thanks, Annie and Katie. Any other questions that folks have? You can either raise your hand and come on screen and ask them, or you can plug them into the chat box.
Hey, while we're waiting on that, I just throw out that for me, that great presentation, you guys, by the way, that crew boss example to me is super powerful, and just knowing that that's kind of the first one, right? But so if you make just some assumptions there that we reduce the amount of classroom training by, I'm not good at math, 40% or whatever, and that's a wag, but if you apply that across the entire training curriculum, all the positions, you know, if you could say we're going to save 40% of the time, energy, and money that we're spending on training right now, and the training we are getting is super good quality and just the right time we need. That's huge for an organization. That's a lot of resources that can be focused somewhere else to me. So, and I know it's just the first one, but that's how my brain works. Is, you know, that to me is why we should be doing this and why BLM should be supported for sure.
So to tag on to that, Jeff, I think it's really important to point out that as we shift to more this on-the-job training, that relationship, can you still hear me? The screen froze. Okay. That relationship between the trainee and the evaluator, like that coaching and mentoring relationship, is going to become even more important than it has been in the past. And so we're also developing like short training videos or modules on what it means to be a good trainee and seek that information out, and you know, play a part in your learning journey. And then what it means to be a good mentor, evaluator, coach, you know, how to give that difficult feedback in a way that really builds our organization and the professional wildland firefighter. So instead of just, you know, kind of maybe avoiding signing the task book or putting your, you know, not signing it fully off, have those conversations so that folks can, you know, gain that speed of competency and really focus on the things they need to focus on to get qualified in the positions.
And one thing I'll add to that, and before we go on to the next question, is that's where that critical need for subject matter expertise to come in, because we're using that real life field experience to say, this doesn't actually need to be taught in a classroom anymore. This can be moved to on-the-job training, and getting that real practical experience to help guide us towards creating that more efficient model is critical for our success.
Thank you guys for that. Wendy, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Hi, everybody. So I think it's really exciting that we're actually looking at the structure of how our training program is set up and really looking at changing that structure. That's pretty exciting. And from the finance chief standpoint, I see this as an opportunity to really look at each individual position and understand what is truly needed for that position. Some positions really are experiential in nature. Having an ops and prescribed fire background myself, you need to do for some of these things in order to really grasp what's needed for the role. And you need to do it with somebody who's really good at it and already is qualified in order to be a good mentor. Other positions, in order to be able to set that person up for success, there is still a really important classroom component. And so I just think about the PTRCs and EQTRs, some of those positions that you showed there as some of the first ones that you'll be focusing on. Those positions, if they come to me with absolutely no frame of reference, they haven't been to EI Suite, they haven't taken like your basic 260, they are really floundering. And it's been a challenge for me as a finance chief in order to be able to provide them a good learning experience when they don't know what they don't know. And so I'm really encouraged to hear that you are actually looking at what's needed for each position and not just saying, hey, we can just throw everybody in the pool, recognizing that that's not the best way to approach some of these, but to really be thoughtful in how you move forward with each of these positions, what experiences need to be had, but also what that person needs to be exposed to in order to set them up for success. That's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Wendy.
Annie, you guys, we have 2 questions in the chat. First one is from Chris Barr.
I think what Chris is saying is he'd like to see the committees have an opportunity to do this. They don't want to get in line, right? Like if they're working on this stuff now, can they work on this stuff now if they're ready? Versus making a list and doing it in priority order, I think that works.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, Jeff, that's exactly right. You know, with the work that our subcommittee is currently looking at with training and having done some IPDs, it makes sense. I understand that, you know, there's a process and a rhyme and reason and order and whatnot to doing it the way it was proposed, but with the effort that we're putting into some of this work now, it'd be nice to make sure that it aligns with where it's going and have that opportunity to build towards that rather than having to adopt to it later on.
Gotcha.
I can take it. Oh, go ahead, Annie.
You're fine, Katie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we do have some opportunities for that. Some of our challenges is just staffing and contractor availability. It really is a matter of resources. And then the other piece that continue to emphasize is that we have a desire to start from the bottom up to really sort of increase efficiencies and reduce any sort of redundancies. And so trying to be strategic about not tapping one resource or functional area more than the other. And then also being mindful about starting at the bottom and slowly working our way up. If not, we kind of get so many efforts going on at once, it's hard to track, and I think we lose some efficiencies with that. But I appreciate the comment, and it's something that we can for sure consider and talk about. And Annie, do you have anything else to add on that?
No, I think you got it. Thank you, Katie.
All right, we have our next one from Ryan Elliott.
It's pretty long, but I'll take a stab at this one. So it's just when we get super busy, high PLs, there's not enough qualified folks to go around to work with trainees, right? So like we have trainees, but we don't have a qualified, and I totally get that. I don't know how to fix that other than my hope for this piece on the NWCG side will make it easier and faster and better to get people qualified. Therefore, it might lead to having more of them who could be trainers at that point. I guess, I mean, that's kind of a stretch, I guess, but that's a hope, you know, outside of NWCG on the mobilization side, NMAC and complex incident management and all those kind of efforts may help that too. But you know, we only have a finite amount of people. When you get these banner fire seasons, there's only so many of them to go around. So I'm not sure how to, you know, I'm not sure we have a silver bullet for that other than if we keep streamlining these systems and making it easier to work through the systems we have. Hopefully that sort of answers your question, Ryan.
Yeah, that's a difficult one to handle. I know personally, some of the stuff I've done as task force leader has been way harder in those situations and way more challenging than, you know, division assignment type stuff. So it's unfortunate that we had several individuals, I think, that could have really gotten some ink in their task books, et cetera, except there's nobody to put it in there for them.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. And then I know Colby's adding some stuff to the chat box, Richard. So hopefully that helps answer some of your questions.
So Annie, I got or maybe not a question. Can you super quickly cover just all the stuff that's going on with non-traditional presentation, meaning like driving to Boise or Redmond or wherever your training center is and sitting in a brick and mortar, the stuff we learned with the learning portal and training delivery committee and stuff out of COVID and all those different things that are going on there. Because I think, well, people like me that have been around too long think of training courses where I'm going to go drive and I'm going to sit in a classroom for 40 hours and get my certificate and leave. And we just don't do that anymore. And can you talk a little bit what at least you think it's going to look like with these, when we say training course presentation, hybrid stuff and online and all that? Right.
Sure. I do suspect, and again, we've only worked through a couple of positions, so high speculation, but I can see just based on, some of our goals or metrics, like we are very interested in speed to competency, making our training, like I said, more accessible to everybody. So I can really see us moving forward with the hybrid model, probably most times when it's appropriate. And again, that comes from the SMEs and the committee and the instructional design function right there. What is the best way to get this information or, training to the trainees? So I can really see us moving forward with a hybrid model. And when you come together with the classroom, you're pulling together those pieces. And whatever that initial piece looks like, it might be asynchronous, online, web-based training. It might be some self-study in some, form or reading or whatever it is, research, panel, just whatever. And then coming together, putting it together via a scenario, simulation, et cetera, in the classroom portion. If there is a classroom portion, I suspect in some cases, you might not need training. You might have your standards, you might need a job aid, a checklist, like some support, like some just-in-time videos, like our CTR training that we have, the timesheet training that we have posted on most of our position pages, like that just-in-time training component that might not be tracked, but is there to support you throughout your position. So there's going to be some of that where it's relevant, and that'll come through the analysis piece. And then I'll also say, whatever training we're developing for the instructor-led portion, when we do that, we'll also have a virtual instructor-led option if possible, so that at a minimum, the instructor-led piece could be taught via Zoom if you need to increase the number of students available, decrease travel, etc. Does that answer your question?
That's perfect. Yep, that's exactly what I was getting at.
Okay.
And then I guess if there's nobody else questions, I got one for Katie. Maybe we've spent a lot of time talking about how we're going to need SMEs. What do the folks out there in viewer land in the field, what are they going to be looking for coming in their email, or what? How are they going to know there's an opportunity, and how do they get involved? Have you guys thought to that point yet, or can you talk to that?
We have a lot of the coordination, and Annie, maybe we can tag team this a little bit. We're putting together right now what we're calling like SME standard operating procedure. So SMEs can have an idea of what will be expected of them when they sign up to help participate. We're coordinating very closely with the committees that I talked to you about at the beginning of the presentation. It'll usually be the committees that help gather subject matter expertise, and we're looking from a diversity of different participants so that we have a pretty robust understanding. So we're not creating training specifically to Nevada BLM, again, because our audience is so large. There have been conversations about possibly developing a form so folks can sign up. And we've got an idea of, okay, I'm really interested in being a trainee an SME as a division supervisor, and being able to sign up so that we have your name in the queue. So when that position comes up, we can reach out and have those conversations about what that looks like. Each agency is handling SME slightly different, but when we have solidified positions that we're going to move forward with. You know, Jeff, we've talked about working very closely with you about working with getting some BLM folks across the board. And the last thing I'll mention on that is that we are specifically trying to diversify the functional areas so that we're not doing all of planning in 1 year and all of operations in 1 year, so that we're not overwhelming any particular functional area in one particular time, understanding that fire seasons ebb and flow, and that this will be a big commitment for any subject matter expert that volunteers to sign up. And Annie, can you speak about more specifics? Do you have anything else?
I think the only thing I would add is the actual marketing piece. So what does it look like when we do reach out? What should people be looking for? So social media will be a big one for us. And honestly, I mean, just the email like that gets passed around, right? We're trying to increase buy-in and like approval support to function as an SME, really trying to get the message to come down from the top down. So ideally it's going to come from, you know, a myriad of different directions to try to reach as many people across the nation as we can. Again, trying to get that representation, not only of our NWCG partners, but of geographic areas as well.
One of the questions is just, and we can put that in the chat, Colby, is joining the NWCG mailing list. That might be an opportunity when this information comes out, and a lot of great information comes out on that mailing list. So Colby will put that in the chat box, the link to get signed up for that, but that's another great avenue to get information from NWCG, and this could be a way that it goes out on a mass scale. We had one, I think we actually have 2 questions in the chat, maybe 3. Back to the previous question, certain positions times could we designate as super trainers who could take on more than 1 trainee at a time?
I would say, yeah, we should consider that. We should inject that in the system. And I'm working from memory here now. I don't remember if we have a standard in NWCG that says 1 trainee to 1 trainer. But if we do, we should maybe consider that. So somebody that's qualified could take on more than 1 trainee. I mean, you got to draw a line somewhere. Like if I'm out there as a qualified div sup, do not send me 15 trainees because it's the last thing I need. But could I take 2? For sure. So yeah, that's a good point. We'll inject that in the system and see if we can work on that piece.
And then we have another question, Annie and staff, that standards are updating, grandfathered in.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, but once you're qualified, you're qualified. You're historically recognized. We're not going to unqualify anybody and make them meet the new, whatever the new thing is. And that's pretty standard across the board. Even now, we don't unqualify people if that makes sense. Yeah, we'll make sure we address that. So that's a really good point. I think people might, I don't know, they might be under the impression that it is only 1-to-1 and you can't do that. Some other people might not. So we'll make sure, if nothing else, it's good clarified somewhere in the system.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for that example. We're gonna kind of roll up here in a few minutes, but any last minute questions? Great questions, great interaction, great presentations today. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Annie and Katie and Jeff for being presenters, and then our back behind the scenes, Colby and Kim for supporting and providing the links in the chat box. All right, anything else for you guys?
Thanks everybody for joining.
Yeah,
Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks for
Thanks for
joining.
listening.
We'll get this set up and posted to our Fire Chat Friday, and then the email will go out next week, also updating the FAQs. Samantha Storm put in our link for next Fire Chat Friday, which is for November 18th. It's a leadership Fire Chat Friday, so you'll have Grant Beebe and Megan Connery on there, providing their leadership perspective of the fire year, kind of what next year is looking like, and then just support and appreciation of all the hard work and everyone's doing this fire season. We would like to take your questions. So right there in the chat box is a form. It's just one simple question. What hot topics do you have that you'd like to have answered? We'll get them as many questions as we can possible during that time frame. And if not, we'll add them to the FAQ document to get them answered. But please go ahead and take the time to form any questions that you have and put them in there. Also, in the email I sent out, and we'll share again, is the link to the previous Fire Chat Fridays as well as the FAQ. So maybe peruse those and see if your question's already in there that's been answered. If not, go ahead and submit that, and we'll get that on the list for them for next week. Or in 2 weeks, sorry. Also, that will be our last one for the year, number 10. We are starting to put together ideas for future Fire Chat Fridays. Have a couple on the OMSP, medical standards, have some on some financial advisory. We have some on mental health. We have also a topic on what is the fire budget and how does it process down from the top down to the bottom. So if you have ideas or suggestions that you'd like to have on the Fire Chat Friday, this is designated for the field. We want to hear from you guys. So go ahead and send me a message. Let me know any topics or ideas that you want to see coming into next fire season or next year. With that, everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you on November 18th. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.